Morning, good morning, good morning. I thought, you know what, while we're at Sidebar, I'll come in and say hi. It's been a little bit. I don't think, really came in and talked about this trial yet, but or came in and talked to you like I normally do during trials. But I thought, you know what, let's change that. So right now they're on Sidebar, not sure what's being discussed, but it looks like there's some sort of an issue that Mr. Alessi wants to bring up. But hopefully everyone's having a great morning. And we are on day 21, if you can believe it, of the Karen Reed case. So um, much different case than what we saw in the first trial. I will say that. I will say that it's definitely been a different presentation. Hank Brennan, clearly showing that he's a defense attorney by trade, and he's trying this case. My dad did that on a couple of cases, but he's putting together a story and he's telling a story. And if you notice with the news clips and the way he's doing it, what he's doing is he's building his argument. He's going to make his case in closing arguments, and he's going to say that this is a simple case. This is a case that the defense is trying to muddy up the waters. They're trying to throw all these potential um, conspiracy theories out there, that there was evidence tampering, that there was this, that there was that. But what this really comes down to is it's really simple. Occam's razor, simplest explanation fits here, and that is there's a relationship that's disintegrating, and there's a reference made to which was this came out in Jen McCabe's testimony. There's a reference made to a previous girlfriend when she references the girl's house in relationship to where the Alperts are at. This sets in motion an argument in the car. It accelerates. Karen Reed's drunk, real easy, gets out of the car, and then really the only issue for the jury is manslaughter, or do we believe it's something more serious than manslaughter? And that's where he's going with this. And I don't think we're going to see the Alberts on the stand. I don't think we're going to see the parade of witnesses that we saw. It doesn't appear, at least to me. I think they're going to leave that to the defense to put on um, and make their case. And that's going to make it more difficult. And of course, Brennan knows this because he's a defense attorney. In order for them, if he doesn't introduce those witnesses, they have to put the witnesses on, and then Bev Canone can jump in and interfere with how much they get to testify, what they get to testify to, because the defense is bringing them in and presenting the evidence, and they have to get in things themselves as opposed to letting them come in on direct and talk about the evening and talk about this and talk about that. They've got to kind of do almost like they're going to have to get them, introduce them as a hostile witness, and they're going to have to cross them as their own witness. And it's a much different scenario than what happened the first case, where they brought all these people in, and the defense was able to come out of the gate cross-examining these witnesses and bringing up all the things that they already know are going to come up when these people get in. But Bev Canone can work to limit that. Now, of course, things are not that simple, because this case is not that simple, because there are a lot of problems with the case, and there are a lot of unexplained things and a lot of questions that continue to get raised with every single witness. And if you're paying attention, if you're looking in, if you go back and we've got all the no breaks caught up, you're going to see that we've included a section of all the questions each day brings out of it, and all those questions represent reasonable doubt. Because if there's a reasonable doubt, if there's a question about something that the jury doesn't have answered, that allows them to come back and acquit Karen Reed. And there are lots, right? There are lots. And one of them, which is always hung out there for me, is why would a police officer who has another police officer who's on his property on the ground, hurt, why is that police officer not outside assisting? Why would he not be coming outside and assisting? And you're going to tell me he doesn't know what's going on? I understand Brennan made the point that there were neighbors that didn't come out, but none of those neighbors were police officers. None of them were hero cops, and he doesn't come out. None of those police officers were up at 2 o'clock in the morning talking to another police officer, who we know was involved in a relationship, or attempting to be involved in a relationship, with Karen Reed, who we know And we know this guy is upset about this, and we see, there's video from the waterfall that will eventually be introduced that's going to show that there appears to be something going on. And then we know there's messages, and that one of the final messages to the man who's laying on the ground there comes from Brian Higgins, who says, "Are you coming?" And those people are all talking. Now, the thing is, here is Kerry's defense doesn't have to prove that Brian Higgins did this. They don't have to prove that anybody did anything. They just have to prove that it's possible. And that's why I think this case is going to be, again, as you look at it, I don't believe there's going to be any way, in my opinion, that you're going to find 12 jurors when they look at this case, if the defense gets to present the case they want to present, that they're going to say is it beyond a reasonable doubt that Karen Reed was the one that was responsible. Could she have done this? Of course. But also, there's a lot of other questions. There's a lot of questions with the phone data. There's a lot of questions that they can't be eliminated. Now, the problem here is as we're watching this, we've already seen a trial, the first trial. So we're aware of a lot of stuff. This jury gets to look at the evidence that's been put forth in the courtroom. And this is a much harder thing for us, especially people deeply involved in understanding this case, to set aside what they've seen, what they've heard. Um, and welcome, Kevin. Looks like Kevin just became a member. Thank you so much, sir. Just saw that here, so thank you for becoming a member here. That's amazing, and welcome to the Justice Watcher family. Um, but so I think it's going to be a difficult situation where for us, when we have all the knowledge and all the things that we know about, all the corruption and all the things that we're aware of, that jury isn't aware of it. It's just like with the Ty Tucker case. When we go to watch the Ty Tucker case, we never got a chance to watch a retrial with all the knowledge we had. And of course, others who had that knowledge in the first trial are watching it. It hits totally different because we know about things that the jury doesn't have any clue about. This jury is coming into that box and they're getting presented with the evidence. So for them, when they get back to that jury room, they're sitting here thinking to themselves, okay, well, the state just presented this case, that we've got phone evidence that suggests, again, like Hank Brennan's trying to put together, where the text stream event occurs. And he says, well, this aligns with this. Well, here's the problem. There were 30 text stream events in the last 6 months before. That text stream event means nothing. Okay. But this is Hank Brennan telling a story. This is what Hank Brennan is going to argue to the jury when he gets that jury twice. He gets, I think, twice. Maybe, I know Boston, actually. I think Massachusetts is the state. I might be confusing it with New Hampshire, but they don't let the state go first. They let the defense go first, and then the state just wraps up. But regardless, he's going to get that final moment with the jury where he's going to argue all these things, and he's going to say, "This is a really clean case. This is a case where there's a lady here who is simply not wanting to take responsibility for what happens. Age old, people are fighting, the relationship's ending, they're arguing. She gets massively drunk, which again, there's there's questions about the blood sample. There's questions about the process they use. There's questions. But here's the thing: when it comes down to it, Hank Brennan can say, "Listen, if she should be at 0.28 up, with that's a she's got a long way to fall before she's not legally drunk. So if you find she's legally drunk and she operated a motor vehicle and she strikes this man, it's clean cut, simple. We've got respected police officers that they're trying to accuse, and what they're going to do is because they're not going to introduce these people, and I don't believe they will. I could be wrong; they might be coming this week. But I don't think they are. They are going to let the defense do that. And then they're going to be able to sit in the position to argue. See, this defense is trying to make all these accusations. So instead of making them part of their case, they're going to make the defense make the case against them, which puts Hank Brennan in the situation that he can argue that this is a desperate attempt by Karen Reed to cover up what she did. Now, like I said, with all of us knowing how this is the problem where corruption runs wild. This is why this is why prosecutors can argue anything they want, and they can make a case against anybody because they have the ability to limit, especially if you have a judge like Bev Canone in your pocket, they can limit what the jury sees. They can make the jury see what they want them to see. Now, for me, I think, and this is where I hope the defense runs into, one of the biggest things that's come out, and this was in the last few days, last week, is this whole tech stream event puts the phone in John O'Keefe's hand, and this is something that must be argued to the jury, in my opinion, because this to me is something that will resonate with jurors back there. I think when they're looking at this, to remind them of this. What the state's saying, what Brennan's going to argue is that John O'Keefe gets out of the car, and we know he's operating his phone. He's closing it, phone in hand. We know it's in hand. We know it's not in pocket because it was found underneath him. So what this means is what Hank Brennan's going to argue is that she shoots that car like a rock at 75% max speed and strikes him. What we're supposed to believe is that she strikes him, and this phone goes flying in the air, right? And somehow it doesn't go flying in the air. It just somehow drops right behind him where he lands on top of it. And it doesn't break. It doesn't have any signs of water damage, doesn't have any signs of impact. But we have a car, 75% max speed, hitting this man, and this phone goes flying in ice on pavement. Okay. And, my wife the other day dropped her phone in the bathroom, and it became clear to me, and we have screen protectors on it, and it cracked her little piece of her screen protector. I had to buy a new screen protector. And I'm like, wait a minute. There's no damage to the phone. There's nothing. The phone's just positioned right under him. How did that happen that way? There's no way. There's no way. So, and that's what makes the case, the state's case, a joke, in my opinion. Because if that phone's not broke, the case is a joke. That's it. Bottom line. Because that phone is the key with the way they're laying it out, and it's great because the state is stuck with that. They're stuck with putting that theory forward. But the defense gets to now say, wait a minute, this is what you're saying happened. And the state doesn't get to go, well, it could have been this and it could have been that. They're saying this is what happened. And we are agreeing that the phone was out. We're agreeing that the phone was in his hand. We're agreeing that the two events, allegedly the tech stream event, which they're alleging was the collision. And now we're going to say, okay, so now it gets to be all about what happened with that phone. If he gets collided with and he is hit, would the phone be okay? Would the phone somehow end up under him? And it wouldn't be knocked completely sideways somewhere over in the snow, getting waterlogged and all that. No, it ends up perfectly underneath him. How does that happen? Well, how that happens is because if he wasn't hit by a car and he was actually assaulted inside the house and he ends up in the house, and the tech stream event is nothing more than a break, a hard break because she's drunk and she's trying to make a 3-point turn and get the hell out of there, and she's angry. And the tech stream event has nothing to do with that. And he goes in and he happens to make it in the house as they're walking away because they're angry, because they're upset, um, and whatever. And then he gets assaulted in the house, and then somebody goes out there, and what do we have? We have DNA. Remember, the DNA tells the story too, which luckily the state's putting it up. Where's the DNA at? Upper arms, legs, right where people will be touching them or moving your body. And there's two other unknown sources of DNA. Could they have tested everybody else in this case? They absolutely could have. That's a question that goes, why would you not test it? How is there two other people's DNA, unknown sources of DNA besides his own, on his clothes? And they could have tested it. They could have eliminated it, but they didn't. So those are things that, again, those are questions. Those are questions that need to be that the state has an obligation to answer. And when you have a phone that shouldn't be where it's supposed, that doesn't make sense to be where it's supposed to be at. You've got marks on his body that don't make sense. You've got injuries that don't make sense. You've got a medical examiner, the last testimony we just had, who can't rule out what the defense is saying happened. And then, of course, if the defense gets to fully put everything in, shows and demonstrates that Brian Higgins, who happens to be one of the final text messages, okay, one of the final text messages to John O'Keefe asking if he's coming. And this is a guy who has romantic interest in John O'Keefe's girlfriend, and he's just had to sit at a bar and watch them interact and get ignored by her. And he's been drinking all day. I don't see how any jury could sit here and say beyond a reasonable doubt that what happened, that Karen Reed was responsible, or that he was responsible. But again, like I said, Hank Brennan can argue whatever Hank Brennan wants to argue. But that to me is something that is a huge weakness that I hope the defense exploits. Um, because there's no there to me it's inexplicable that how that to explain how that phone ends up underneath him when there's no good reason for that, and that the phone ends up in pristine condition, that it's not broke, it's not chipped, it's not hurt, it's not there's no signs of what we would expect to find um with that. So there's those are the things that to me are sticking out right now. And and like I said, there's a wealth of questions, which I will hopefully get deeper into as we're going. But I wanted to check in with you guys and just say hi on stream. Let you know I appreciate everybody who's coming in and out and watching this. Um, Leave a comment. Make sure you check out the descriptions as you're watching these videos and the no breaks, especially the no breaks. The no breaks tells the story of where the case is at. It highlights a lot of important information that occurred in the day. So even if you don't want to go watch the whole no breaks edition, check out the description of it because it's going to communicate with you. And then of course the individual moments, clips, and testimonies that we feel are important, we're going to be putting out. And that's a deeper dive into a particular moment that we think has impact. And if you go and you utilize both the testimony and clips playlist and the no breaks, it's going to give you a lot of a real solid understanding of what you're seeing, the legal issues that are being raised, what's happening in the courtroom, things of that nature. And then, of course, I'm going to try to be more interactive now that things seem to be settling down. We're getting a little better hold over things. I'll hopefully be coming in and out to talk to you guys and tell you what I'm thinking as we're watching this together and watching this unfold. And then I hope to be able to uh, I was supposed to be doing a somewhat daily podcast with my good friend Jody Bolt over at the Defense Rest, which go catch her. She's got a fantastic database that she put together, and I'm very hopeful that I will be able to get into doing that. We like I said, we ran into this trial once again. This trial represented the beginning of just some YouTube drama where I got hit with a copyright that I beat. It was not correct, but it caused all sorts of problems at the beginning, and then on top of that, I've had uh, some unbelievable things happen with the family. My wife's mother passed away unexpectedly. Her father's battling cancer, and we're having to help with all of that. And then we've got my son ended up having an expected surgery, but there was some complications with it that ended up putting me on the road between me and Washington D.C. And it's just been a real crazy situation. And then we're trying to also deal with getting our roof repaired, which has been kind of put on hold because we've been in and out of town so much. So just a lot of things. And then we ran into fiber issue or internet issues, which we got all taken care of. And it's just been a really challenging time during the beginning of this trial. So I have not been as involved as I would like to be, especially in a case that I believe is very interesting. Now, be sure to also check out our coverage of the Dominguez case. That's a case we're not carrying the normal caseload we have in the past because we had to scale back a little bit. But the one case that I'm keeping on and covering is the Dominguez case out in California. It comes on every day at 12. The case starts airing about 12:30, 1 o'clock. And due to the way the feed is that I'm getting a hold of, sometimes I'll start it later and do an evening feed, or sometimes I've been started a little late and try to get ahead of it. But um, because they don't always it's there's delays and things because the judge is delaying the broadcast, so it kind of wreaks havoc with trying to get a schedule together, and it's a mess. But we're putting it together and we're staying with it because it's an extremely interesting case, and it's a bifurcated trial, meaning in California it's not a matter of what did he do this. It's a matter of is he mentally was he mentally ill when he did this. And in California, it's really interesting because there's two parts to the trial. There's the guilt. You have to plead guilty, not guilty twice, which he did. And he gets to have two separate trials with the same jury. Right now, he's having the guilt phase. Now, they can still, interestingly enough, argue. They cannot argue insanity, but what they can argue is that he didn't have the mens rea, meaning he did not have the intent to do this, and he can argue that in the element uh, of intent. So he can argue that mentally he could not formulate that, but they can't put doctors on. They can't. They can talk about it. They can talk about how he was. I think they can do a little. They're very limited, but if the jury finds him responsible and says, "Okay, state proved beyond a reasonable doubt he did this," which they're going to, then you move into the second phase, and this is where it gets really confusing for a lot of people when you're following the California process, because then what they're going to do is they're going to have to, then they actually have a full trial on whether or not he was mentally ill or not. And then they literally have three verdicts that they can do: not guilty by reason of insanity, which means he gets locked up in a mental hospital. And in California, it's pretty much the rest of his life. Um, or guilty but mentally ill, meaning he's mentally ill, but the mental illness had nothing to do, did not get in the way of his decision to do the crime. But he's going to get medical treatment, and he gets similar to what we saw in the Chloe driver case. Or three, guilty, meaning they affirm the guilty verdict and say he's not mentally ill at all, he's faking. I don't believe in this case you're going to get that one. It's going to be a difference between either guilty but mentally ill or not guilty by reason of mental illness or insanity. So that's going to be a, again, it's scheduled to be a 8 to 10 week trial, because right now we're in week 3. We just finished week 3 of the trial of the guilt phase, and then once they get done with that, then there's going to be a huge fight over his mental state. Now, in the event that they would find him not guilty uh, in the case in chief, because they would say, okay, he's not able to formulate the intent that needed to get to a certain point. Now, this is the interesting part. The main thing that's going to be at issue here is saying, and again, is it second degree? Is it first degree? Is it manslaughter? I don't think you're going to get to manslaughter, but they could in this case get him to second degree. And that's what the defense is going to try to argue, because then that has huge bearing and impact if he were to be found guilty but mentally ill, or just guilty and say there was no mental illness factor at all in this case, which I don't believe at all you're gonna have that option at all. But they're gonna be, so there's gonna be some arguing over what he should be found guilty of. But anyways, it's a case to watch. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting process they have in California. It's one of the reasons why we're highlighting that, because that's what we want to do and show on this channel. That's what it's about, is educating you on all the little nuances and things that go on in our justice system across the nation. And if we can even get some worldwide feeds and show you across the world. But um, that's what's going on there. So make sure you got your notifications on. We're really just doing the live broadcast on that trial. We haven't dug deep into it, but we may get into it a little bit here, especially as once it gets into the mental illness phase. So that's there. And then be on the lookout. We're going to be doing a new series at night. We're going to be putting forward there's a death penalty case in Florida. It's called the Xbox murders. It was a massacre back in 2006 that occurred. But the interesting part about the case, the reason why it's attracted my attention to the case, is because this case has literally continued to be affected by all of the changing legislation in Florida. Mainly, these guys were convicted and then sentenced to death, and then the Supreme Court, interestingly enough, reverses the convictions because there wasn't a unanimous verdict for the death penalty phase. Then Florida changes its law and says, yeah, you don't need a unanimous verdict anymore. It can be 10-2. So they're in the middle of their of getting the trial going, and they have to declare a mistrial because the law changed. So then they litigate that for a year. Then they're ready to go back to trial again, right? And they set it up, and then Florida changes the law again and says now you can go 8 to 12, and that ruling comes down in the middle of the trial starting again. Mistrial declared again, done. And now they just recently went back and had their trial on it. So Doe Lie says, my theory of John O'Keefe's death: slip and fall caused by dog attack. I think that there's a lot of potential with that theory, Doe Lie. And I think that the thing is this: remember, no one has to prove that happened. The defense only has to say, could it have happened? And when you look at the injuries on his arm, I feel like, there's no way you can say that couldn't have happened uh, by a dog. And again, it comes back to tying that in with the phone. He's he's hit so hard that he sustains injuries like that to his arm, yet his phone somehow doesn't go flying. It falls perfectly underneath him and lands right underneath his body and is perfectly protected. There's nothing wrong with the phone. How does that happen? It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Doesn't happen. That's crazy. And Bodie says Florida is crazy. Innocent people have been unalived with even with unanimous. I know, it's crazy. But that's why I'm saying that's why we're going to cover it, because this is a case that was reversed because the verdict wasn't unanimous, and they just wasted all this money. And guess what? They didn't get a unanimous verdict. I don't want to ruin it, but anyways, it's insane. What they're doing in this case. They literally have wasted probably millions of dollars on this case, right? Just to get to the same spot they were just at. It is absolutely the way Florida does it. Of course, I was watching Grady. I think it's Grady Judd. He was talking yesterday. He was doing a press conference. He was talking about how Florida used to be a place where the criminals ruled it, and they made all these changes. Yeah, they made these changes, but I mean, my God, the way they're changing it, it doesn't make any damn sense at all. Um, um, so Bodie says, I'm not sure what happened. Dio might be right, but I don't think I agree. Listen, and remember, we all have to understand it's not. It's do we believe the state can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she did this and that she is the one that did this alone and that she did it the way they're saying she did it. And I don't believe they can. I mean, unless this jury, I don't believe you're going to find 12 jurors that certainly not going to believe that she turned her car into a torpedo and just missile rocket it right into him at 75% max speed. It makes no sense. Um, yes, he does, Bodie. He does. I mean, I like his press conferences. I think he's funny, but I just thought to myself as I'm listening to this, and he wasn't doing a press conference about this case in particular, but it was just like, to me, that encapsulates the problem is that Florida has gone off the rails in trying to become in trying to figure out now it's like the total opposite. It's like how can we violate, how can we get around the Constitution at every turn and every twist and every place we can? How can we how can we not have to give people their due process rights and not have to give them their constitutional rights. And that's problematic because to me, that's what separates us. That's what makes America special. And if we don't understand that, and if the average everyday person doesn't start understanding that, then we're going to be walked into giving those things up, and then it's going to be a really scary situation. Because when you have the power of the government, they show up at your house with a warrant for your arrest, and they're taking you out. That's about the scariest thing that could possibly happen. Because right now, you've got no resources to fight. And they've got lots to fight with, and you better believe they've got at least something. And as you're going to see, it doesn't matter whether you're guilty or you're innocent or anything like that. As you're going to see with Hank Brennan, he's coming. He's going to argue. They've hired him in. He's an experienced defense attorney. He knows exactly how to do it, and he understands it matters not what actually happened. It matters what you can argue in court. And all he has to do is get enough in that he can go make a very strong argument in what he thinks happened and convince the jury that, listen, none of this other stuff makes sense. We have a dead man here. He's dead in the snow. We have Karen Reed's vehicle is present. We're giving you a potential event that we're going to argue it occurred at. And we're going to say, look, it's simple. She was drunk. She did this. Dulai says, everything in this Karen Reed case has concerned me since day one. I'm a resident of Massachusetts, and I heard the news of J.O.'s death on the news. That snowy day, I suspected a cover up. Well, you should be very concerned because, look, there's other cases out there that have shown that this group of people and this group of officers uh, are had a history of it. I mean, when you look at Buchanan's testimony, I mean, that is the most disturbing testimony you have going on, that you can see. You can see that it's cover-up culture. Look, Buchanan is here because they're not going to bring Proctor in. Okay, I don't believe Proctor's coming in the state's case. Defense is going to have to call Proctor. And this is by design. okay, because they want to reserve the argument to say, this is the defense getting desperate. The defense is desperate because this is a simple case. We've shown you how simple it is. The defense wants to muddy the waters, and they're going to make that argument. All right, looks like court's beginning, guys. We're going to jump in. Great discussion. I appreciate everybody. Oh, hold on. Maybe not. Please go into the fan. I don't know what's happening. So we'll talk a little bit more. I'm keeping my eye on it, though. Don't worry. Once it comes, we will be right in the courtroom. Bodie says Judd never is so much. Oh yeah, that guy. I mean, he really doesn't. He's, uh, you know, he he doesn't he does not show any recognition of the presumption of innocence. He goes right through it. He's entertaining, but it's disturbing at the same time when I see him because it shows you the state of things in Florida. Uh, Now, Bodie says a different police department should have investigated from day one. Absolutely, yes. I think there should have been absolutely an independent, someone completely independent of any of the figures in this case, which of course is one of the first red flags. But that's something that the defense gets to argue to the jury and say, wait a minute, there's a lot of problems here. But when you look, they kept 5 cups of blood in an office and didn't book them properly, didn't test any of them. I mean, that was crazy when Buchanan was talking about that. And then you've got, of course, him trying to say that this was an investigation that was done with honor, where you've got the lead investigator sending text messages and making derogatory comments about the person that eventually gets charged, basically saying that there's no way the Alperts are going to be charged, showing tunnel vision, I mean, that alone should disqualify anything that happens after that. Should be just disqualified. You can't trust it. And again, I think the defense is going to do a really good job of arguing things. And hopefully they did a really good job of picking a jury. I don't know how. We don't know because we weren't there for it. And we don't know how much Bev Canone got in the way of picking a fair jury. But I, I think that I think they're going to be okay here. I just don't see there. I think the only question will be is whether or not this will be another hung jury, which the state will absolutely go for round 3. At this point, they have to. They're boxed in. They can't. They can't not. Uh, or do they? Um, or do they acquit her? Or does the jury come to some sort of a compromise, because we know where the last jury was at. They eliminated even the possibility that this was an intentional act. And they said this was something that derived from her being drunk, which is something that I think jurors, when you're in that jury room and the pressure's going on, depending on where the jury falls, somebody could be convinced and say, well, is this likely she was drunk? They've proven she was drunk. They're fighting. They're arguing. Again, one of the key facts, it's a small little detail that came out in Jim McCabe's testimony. But remember, she says that she's talking to John on the phone, and we don't know if the phone was on speaker. We don't know if it was, if Karen Reed was hearing it, and she makes reference to a house. This is a house of a lady that John previously, was a source of jealousy for them. That is enough. They're drinking. They've already been fighting earlier today. We know that their relationship is in that stage where it's just everything is tender. Everything is ready to blow up. Everything is ready to set off fire. And boom, they pull up. They're fighting. They're arguing. He jumps out of the car to go in. She pulls up, floors it into him, and accidentally hits him. Or she's all angry and upset and hits him. Either way, you get to manslaughter with either of those thoughts. If you're believing she was really angry at him and runs him down, although I don't believe this was a crime of that this was intentional. But you do that. She's drunk. She pulls out. She's angry, and boom, she hits him. She goes home. Now, of course, one of the problems with that, again, that contradicts itself, is all the phone calls. But then again, maybe she didn't realize she hit him. All the phone calls. And remember too, okay, I want you to remember this is another thing about that phone. This phone is very important, guys. This phone is much more important. What was she doing the entire time, right? She's calling him. What is going on at that place? There are people still walking in and out, right? Wouldn't his phone be ringing? Wouldn't people have heard a ringing phone? Shouldn't that have brought the attention to wherever his body was at? Now, yes, the phone was underneath him, but it's still going to be ringing out. Now, I want you to think of why. Now, if that phone would have been, if you would have been knocked and that phone's over left or right, there's a reason why that phone was placed underneath him. And that tells you that there was a police officer thinking. And the reason why is because they know his phone was going off and they know he was getting calls. Why? Because Karen Reed was blowing his freaking phone up, right? So why did they put the phone underneath them? Because they knew they had to have an explanation for how all these people would have been walking in and out of that house during that hour time that she was blowing up his phone, and not one person heard a phone ringing. Not one person, as they're leaving, hears the phone ringing as she starts calling. That there's nobody in the world who hears that. So again, come back to the phone. Phone's not broke. Case is a joke, right? Because of the fact that that phone is alive and it's well and it's comfortably underneath them. And there's so much that the rides off of that that tells you that that's where that there's a problem with this case. There's a big problem with this case. And the phone is the thing that tells you that. That's the biggest piece of evidence because that phone where it ended up positioned, the lack of people hearing that phone ring, the lack of people that would have heard it when they should have been hearing that phone ringing. It should have been ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. Okay. But it wasn't heard by anyone. It wasn't heard by a neighbor taking their dog out. It wasn't heard by anyone. Not one person heard it. Now maybe he had it on vibrate, but I don't believe we've heard that evidence. But that should have been ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. And specifically, we know now they created the reason why they would say, huh, why? Listen, Dulai. They created that tells you that somebody put that phone underneath them because they knew he got phone calls and they had to explain why the phone would never be heard. And it wasn't heard because they came back and said, well, he was laying on top of it. But the question is, how would the phone have ended up where he would be laying on top of it? It doesn't make sense if he's getting hit at 75% max speed plowed over, that phone should be somewhere over in the snowbank where it's ringing and ringing and ringing for the whole neighborhood to hear. Because Karen Reed's blowing his ass up. And we know there were people still going in and out of that house during that time. And yet no one's hearing a phone. Yet people are leaving. Yet, remember, Colin Alper gets picked up, right? Right around that time. No one's hearing that phone ring. They knew they had to take care of that phone. That phone is the key. Because that phone should not have been underneath them. And if it wasn't underneath them, then they have to explain how no one heard the phone. So someone put the phone underneath them so that they could explain that's why the phone was never heard. So if that question ever came up, and who's going to be thinking like that? Oh, I don't know, a seasoned cop, a seasoned ATF agent who's going to understand that we got to do that because they were aware that the phone was going off because he was there and it was going off and it was in the house. And that's why no one in the neighborhood hears it. That's why it's not an issue. So then they had to figure out that's why the phone ends up not in his pocket and underneath him, because if it's in his pocket, it still could be heard. So it goes underneath him where his body's laying on it. And they said, well, that's why it was never heard. And that alone, again, I hope the defense brings that up, which I think they will. They don't need to bring it up now. They don't need to make an issue of it now. That's a great argument for them to close with and say, listen, this is the big deal. Like the phone is a key. It's a key for lots of reasons because it shows he was moving, it shows he was interacting, it shows that this was going on. But it also shows, oh, absolutely. It would have even heard a vibrate. It would have been vibrating on the, it would have been vibrating on the damn, it would have been vibrating on the ground underneath them. It should have directed it towards him. It's not like there was a lot of traffic out there. Not to mention they would have seen the light of the screen going off and going off and going off and going off. And if it didn't be, and we'd have to assume it didn't land, it wouldn't have landed on the, well, we don't know. It should have been broken or damaged, I think, if you get hit by a car, and it gets knocked out of your hand and then lands on the pavement in a violent way, it goes flying through the air. There ain't no iPhone that's going to survive that. I mean, in my opinion. That's my opinion. Now, I don't know, maybe he had some armor case on it or something. But, you know, so it's it's one of those things that I think that has to be answered, but or should have an answer to. And to me, that's going to be that's an argument that I think could be brought. Well, no one brought it up because I don't think anyone's really thought of it like that. Because a lot of times, they're look, you have to understand when you're intrinsically involved in the case. Now, Alessi might bring something up like this because he seems to be the type who's, again, remember we had Jackson and the other Unetti were both present in the last trial, but they're caught up in the minutia of all these other things. They're caught up in proving, wanting to go out and prove for ego wise that these guys did this, and again they lose track of what they're really supposed to be doing in the courtroom. That's great, right? Bring it up, go hard at it, but remember you don't have to prove it, right? But they're involved in not thinking about all these other little things that are going around them, and for them they're more worried about, to them, the 38 steps and all of that stuff, which again the defense is, or the state is plowing through. But the reality, one of the big things is how does the phone end up underneath them? Why does it end up underneath them? Well, what does that tell you about the fact that it did? Because it tells you about the psychology of what they were setting up, and that tells you what was the setup, because it shouldn't have ended up underneath them, but it ended up underneath them because they knew she was calling. And the fact that she was calling, all those calls, of course, they're trying to figure out how to deal with. Well, all those calls are beautiful because she's calling them left and right. So the phone's ringing left and right. So they should be hearing that. That thing should be going off. It should be waking up people in the neighborhood, right? And the thing is look, it's something they should reserve the closing argument, because, and maybe there's an answer that says it was on silent, and maybe they're afraid of that, or maybe they're going to say, well, the state will just say that he was laying on top of it. Well, yeah, the state would just say he's laying on top of it, but if you're going to say that the Alperts and the Higgins were involved in a cover up, then that would explain why the phone ended up out of his pocket and underneath him, when that is not what should have happened, in my opinion, based on what you see there. Now, is it possible that could happen? Of course, anything's possible, but is it likely that you're saying that somebody gets clipped by a car and literally ends up on top of their phone? No. But there's a reason why they wanted him on top of the phone, because they needed to have an explanation for why no one heard the phone ringing. And that's what makes sense. So we'll see what the defense does with that, if they pick up on it. But it's something that they should absolutely be exploring as a viable argument, and it makes perfect sense to every common person out there that has a phone and says, "Wait a minute, you're right. How would the phone travel that way, and why would it end up that way? Why would things end up the way they have?" And there's an answer, because guess what? He wasn't hit by a car. And then when you look at everything else that falls from that, the injuries, and here's the thing: we know he got hit violently because his arms all jacked up. I mean, it looks like it, which looks, again, if we're just going to say he was hit by a car, he was not, no dog was involved. Well, then okay, he was hit so violently that he ends up on the ground, and he hits the ground, and look at the damage done to him by it, and yet his phone is undamaged, laying perfectly underneath him. Come on, please, please, absolutely ridiculous. The reason why the phone wasn't touched is because the phone was in his pocket when they were beating the hell out of him, and or whatever happened, and he falls back and hits his head and dies. And then they know his phone's going off, and then she's trying to reach him, and they know they got a freaking problem. And again, they can anticipate exactly what's going to happen. They figure she's going to come looking for him. They know that she knows that he's there, and they're trying their damnedest to try to cover this whole thing up and get him out in the snow. And they're figuring, okay, and this is why. And look, remember, everyone would say, well, why would they do this, and how would they know? Well, how would they know? Because she's calling him. Okay, it's clear that when she calls him 17 times that they're arguing. So now it's real easy. Put him in the freaking yard. We're just saying that she hit him. And so this frame up thing is not like something that comes out of the ether. It's not like they had to think hard on it. It's all going. And these are trained police officers who, I'm sorry to tell you, look, these guys know how to cover something up. Okay. Eh, I mean, look at what happens when they're trying to cover up their own activities at a shooting or something that goes off the rails. They know how to do it, and they had hours to do it, and they're putting it all together. And then when you look and you go, well, wait a minute, let's see. Well, did they destroy their phone? Yeah, they did. Did they turn over their phone records? No, they didn't. Did he show up outside? No, he didn't. The dog's gone. Oh, the carpet floors are up and gone. Oh, wow, they remodeled the house. They sell the house. They get rid. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, it's right in front of you. This is not rocket science. And then you look at all this. It says, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. If this was just a symbol, she hits them and they go. None of it makes any sense. And then you've got Jen McCabe and Kerry Roberts who are conspiring together. You've got Lank who comes in, who's the fixer, who he's reaching out with Proctor, and they're all connected. And there's this incestuous connection that, again, unfortunately, here's the thing. Again, a judge like Bev Canone can absolutely limit what the jury's allowed to see in all of this. And that's what her goal is. And that's what she's going to do. And I'm telling you that the strategy is now that the defense, when the case gets turned over to the defense now is going to have the challenge of getting all of that in. And she's going to play defense like you've never seen before. Yeah. So and that's and it's going to be crazy. It's going to be nuts. It's going to be frustrating. It's going to be frustrating to the people that know what she's keeping out. But the question is again, if this is done right, you don't even need to get all that in. Like that's all. It's like I remember, talking to Ty, and he wanted to get a lot of stuff in his case to show all the corruption. No, look, you need enough in to suggest there's doubt, and there's plenty that you can get in this case. There's plenty of things you can push in. There's, put Proctor up on the stand and call him up and cross and confront him with all his problems. Confront him and confront the others. Call him up, get him on the stand, cross-examine him, or if you handle them as hostile witnesses, confront them with what you need to, and raise the doubt, raise the issues, and show them that this is not a simple, easy case. So that's what they got to do. Um, but the whole thing is that I think that that's got to be addressed in this case is um, to me is the fact that that the people who investigated this case were allowed to investigate the case at all, and that there's been no oversight, and there's been a complete breakdown, in my opinion, with the duties of the Commonwealth Attorney's Office to come in and look at this case and say, wait a minute, look at these problems, and instead what they've done is they've gone out and I mean they hired in a private attorney to come in because apparently their attorneys were not good enough to clean up this mess. I mean, that's what we're to understand. I mean, if I was working at the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, I would be furious that Hank Brennan got brought in. I mean, what exactly is wrong with the attorneys that are there? If this is such a easy cut and dry case, I mean, this is as easy as it comes if it's what it is, right? So why do we need all that? Why do we need to hire in extra people? Why do we need to spend millions of dollars to cover this up and go two trials deep? You know, why is Bev Canone rushing the jury out and not wanting to pull that jury before and not wanting to take serious about the fact that if those jurors found Karen Reed not guilty of the highest of second degree, then she should have been given that benefit and she should only be on trial for manslaughter. But they were perfectly happy to go right around that. Under your scars, welcome, welcome. Good to see you, old friend. And yes, family is doing better. We are getting things back in line. My Carson, little baby boy, he's doing great. He's finally we finally got him around everything with his stuff. So that's great. But now we're just working through, hopefully, my wife, of course, is still grieving and adjusting to the fact that her mom is not here anymore because they were very, very close. But she's putting all her energy now into her dad, who right now he's fighting cancer, but he's got we've got him into this clinical trial that hopefully we're told could very well extend his life. We hope it does, or at least give him a better quality of life while he's here. So we're hopeful and very trying to be positive and move forward. And that all starts and he gets his first trial dose. He's got to get, I think it's 4 of them, and then they evaluate, and then they do 6 in total if it all goes well. But we're hoping it's going to extend him out for a while. So that's what we're hoping. But so far it looks like things we're finally getting back to kind of got the feet back on the ground again, and we're moving. Not moving as fast as we were, but we're moving. That's what it's about. Yep. Uh, have my 81-year-old mom living with me 24. It is hard. It is very hard. Like I said, as you all know, I lost my dad a year ago, and then um, she just lost her mom, and they were uh, definitely big pieces of our family. So it's very difficult to think of them not being here now with us. But it's something that we're moving forward with, and we're getting through. So it's just like I said, it's just part of life, but it's a difficult part of life. So um, you know, but hopefully, like I said, I know we've got the Reed trial going on right now. I'm hopeful that as we get into, if the Adelson case goes to trial in June like it's supposed to, and there's a few other ones I got my eye on. I hope we'll be back full steam ahead, ready to rock, ready to dig in, ready to go after it. Oh wow, under your scars. That is a rough year. That is a rough year. Um, my wife, we've lost 3 because right after my wife's mom passed away, there was another lady who was like a mom to her, and she passed away on Mother's Day. Now this is really sad stuff here, because on Mother's Day, my wife, um, we're at like celebrating Mother's Day, and this lady calls and she misses the phone call. She didn't know she called, but her phone was like in the other room. So she gets a message from her. Unfortunately, when she gets the voicemail that night, it's late. So she's like, okay, that's fine. She had to work the next day. She's like, I'll call her and touch base with her. And of course, it was, hey, honey, I know you lost your mom. And this lady had lost her mother. And my wife got in with her family because she had cared for her mom years and years ago. Really nice lady, really nice family. We all became close. They even all came to our wedding and everything. And they'd really grown a great close bond. And this lady was like, listen, I'm here for you. Call me, whatever. That night, a few hours after she leaves my wife that message, she has a massive heart attack in her sleep and dies. And of course, my wife was just devastated. It was like, I missed her call, and I said, listen, the way things sometimes work in the universe is you were meant to miss that call because you got something even better. If you'd have had the call, you would have just had the memory. Now you have that message she brought to you on Mother's Day forever, right? You can keep it forever. It's hard to see that way. You couldn't have prevented anything. It's not like you would have known what was about to happen. And it was somewhat unexpected. This lady had some things going on medically, but it was nothing that would have expected that she was going to have this happen. But so my wife was like re-devastated all over again, and it was just insane. Um, and just one of those things. So absolutely, you're 100% right under your scars, and that's why you gotta take advantage of each and every day and each and every moment. You never know. Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed. Um, Nothing is guaranteed. That is 100%. Um, so it looks like I'm not sure what's going on in the trial here, though. They're on a break, and they've not. Just so anyone who's joining in right now, I know we only have, I think, 3 of you out there right now. Unfortunately, we lost a lot of steam after the whole copyright situation. So we're battling back. We're going to get back there and get everybody. But yeah, it looks like there's something going on because they started out. Immediately, Alessi asked to see her at sidebar. Then they come out of sidebar and then they take a break. So I don't know if they're in chambers now discussing stuff, or if this was like a situation where whatever they were talking about, they needed extra time, or if we're going to run into another situation where we're going to be told court's canceled today. Who knows? I don't know. Something's going on. And I've heard through the grapevine that there's issue with jurors, in that there's a strong possibility this case could actually end up in a mistrial this week. I I don't know if that's going to be true or not. I was hearing rumors, and then we have a start like today. So who knows? That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking under your scars. You said he rode off on weekend, rode off car on weekend. Yes, he is. That is very lucky. Yes, it is. Yes, yes, yes. So do we have that wrong? Was something typed wrong under your scars? But so we'll see what happens here. I don't know. It's I'm looking forward to seeing what comes this way, because pretty much I'm expecting, it's my understanding that potentially the state might rest this week. So we'll see. We'll see what the state has left. Now maybe I'll be shocked and they'll start bringing in all the people from the party and we'll see the parade of witnesses. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the state is really focusing on saying, okay, our focus right now is the events that happened outside of 34 Fairview, at the extent of the story that needs to be told. They literally relied on the friends. They relied on Jen McCabe, because she was present with Karen and she heard I hit her. And again, like I said, they're going to make their argument is she confessed. She said, I hit him. That's consciousness of guilt. Simple case. We have text stream event. All, and Brennan's going to make the argument. All those things can't, like, in order for you to believe that she's not guilty, all these things have to be coincidences, that they come together like that. Well, guess what? Sometimes, yeah, there are coincidences. Um, and you know what? It's not completely crazy that when you see somebody laying on the ground and you're trying to piece together the evening, she's not thinking that John went in and got beat up. She's thinking to herself, how the hell does he end up like this? Could I have hit him? I mean, it is not unreasonable. So to me, that's not conscious guilt. That's just somebody processing a traumatic event and trying to understand how this could have happened. That you have a guy who you drop off to go in there and he's now laying in the snow, bloody, hit. And she's thinking, could I have hit him and not known? What could have happened? Oh my God, what? And of course, Kerry Roberts and Jen McCabe are talking, stop, shut up. What are you talking about? So to me, that's not conscious of guilt. Doesn't mean Jack. That doesn't mean Jack. Okay, that's just someone processing a traumatic event. Now, of course, Brennan's going to argue that no, once you put the context in, once you show the text stream event, once you show that there were problems in the relationship, and then you show he's gonna argue that there was a triggering event, that something was brought up, she got jealous, they get arguing, and boom. I've done a few polls, yes, under your scars in some of my live premieres, and I guess I can put up a poll right now today. Let's see where we're at. I agree. Jurors, listen, jurors, again, as I was saying earlier, jurors are given the reality of that courtroom, right? And if you've served on a jury before, you understand what I'm talking about. And having served on a jury, having been in the courtroom and watched multiple trials in person, um, I can say that it's a lot different. YouTube and watching it from the comforts of our living room or our cell phone or listening to the trial really does not do it justice at all. Okay. Because when they're in there, they're seeing this case through the lens of what the state is presenting and what's allowed to come in or not come in. Remember, they're not allowed to consider anything else. And these jurors will take that pretty serious. So when they're looking at this case, we have to literally remove all the noise, because we wouldn't qualify as jurors. We have to remove all that noise that we know. We have to look at what was presented, what was the story. What was the narrative? What's the narrative that the state is telling? And then we have to say, okay, now we also have to look at what are the questions being raised to that narrative? And what are the questions that the defense is raising and saying, wait a minute, hold up, this doesn't make sense. And there's a lot. But the question is, for us, those questions make perfect sense because we have a lot of other context to apply to it. Do those questions make sense? If you're a juror sitting in that box, no other context, and all you're hearing is, this is a simple case. This is a case about two people, to go out to a bar. They're involved in a very volatile relationship. And guess what? They end up in a fight. They end up in an argument. And she's drunk. He's been drinking. And on that pathway between the bar and where they're going to have a potential nightcap, they get into a fight. Something happens. Now, here's where things blur. We're going to prove to you, and I'm talking as if it's Hank Brennan, that the first step we need to do is prove to you that Karen Reed caused his death. Then we prove to you what was her state of mind at the time when she caused the death. And what they want to do is make that the debate, because then they win, because she goes away for 20 years, which we know she's getting all of 20 years if she gets convicted on this, and among other charges that she's got, she's going to get her max sentence, right? And that's a win for the state. And then there's the other side. So that for Hank Brennan, that's a win, because what he needs is to get a conviction of any kind. And then that eliminates any of that eliminates any liability for anybody involved in the case of saying that this was a cover-up. But the reality of the situation is that you can have both ways, right? Because what you have is an extension of the volatility of a relationship that extends into Brian Higgins, who's in that house, who to me is the person that the defense needs to lean heavily in, since they can't get to Colin Alpert. But what we know is that if John walked in that house, he was walking into a lion's den of people who have problems with him. You've got Colin Alpert, who's a young, hot-blooded kid who had problems with John when they were neighbors. We've got Brian Higgins, who has his eyes on John's woman, who's been attempting to drag her into an affair and potentially even get her away from John. And she's at this particular juncture coming into the night, guess what? She's rejected him, right? She's put him on ice for days. And suddenly there he is at the bar. And there he is texting her. And there he is watching her. And there he is, then next, after sitting at the bar and watching her and John interact and getting iced by Karen, he's like, hey, John, come on back to the house. Come on back to the house, John. And, you know, he's upset. He's angry. Now, the question, of course, is, and this is the question I would pose to jurors, does it make sense that why would he want to beat up John then? What would happen? I mean, if John has no idea, how does he walk through the door? Well, again, we don't know, and we're not going to know, because guess what? The police, who are obligated to investigate all of these angles, who are obligated to eliminate any and all doubt, we don't have to know. It might not even have been a thing. It might not have even happened. But the state is obligated to remove and investigate properly and remove that doubt. And they haven't done it in this case. And that's the simple argument the defense has to make. But Brennan's going to say, hey, it doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? But, on the flip side, is it possible? Yeah, it is. And if it's possible, did they eliminate it? No, they didn't. And it's what they didn't do. They didn't DNA test. They didn't question these people. They didn't search the house. They didn't go inside. They didn't question why they got rid of their animal. They didn't go in and say, wait a minute, you got rid of your flooring, you sold your house. None of these things were questioned. They were covered up. They were never addressed. And that is reasonable doubt, because you have a viable theory, a second option that was never investigated. That is textbook reasonable doubt. You cannot convict the person when you have that. And yes, I agree under your scars. I love Alessi and Jackson. I love Alessi. I think, listen, I like Jackson, right? I liked him from the first round. Alessi is the star here. Let's be clear. He is the epitome of what a good defense attorney is. This is a man, I don't know what Jackson and Unetti and all those guys have gotten paid, unless he's gotten paid nothing. He took this case pro bono. He's cut from the same cloth as my dad, because that's exactly what my dad would have done, because he understands the value. If he wins this case, he'll make more money from people wanting to have him represent. But he is aggressive, but in a good way, in a competent way. And he's smart and he's asking all the right questions. And he's going to win this case for him. Anyways, looks like I'm hearing we're back in the courtroom.
All right. I was told counsel wanted to see me at sidebar again.
But if not, we may be seated.
Well, I guess y'all didn't think you'd see me that soon, huh? Wow, we're at another sidebar. So I don't know what in the world's going on. Maybe we'll find out. Maybe we won't. I don't know. This is crazy. Um, we go sidebar, break, sidebar. I mean, the jury, I assume the jury's in the house. I mean, it's like, Jesus, they got to be wondering what the hell's going on, just like we are. But anyways, as I was saying, I love Alessi. I think he's great. I think Jackson's great. I think the defense is very competent. Um, and I just think that I think they're very competent people. And listen, Hank Brennan, I don't like the position he's in, but Hank Brennan's not a bad attorney. And he's a guy that represented Whitey Bulger. Okay, Hank Brennan's a good defense attorney. It's a shame to see him on this side of the show, but I think what Hank Brennan's doing is he's saying, "Let me show you how I win with absolute garbage evidence," and that's what he's doing. And he's putting a case together. And for this is a battle of egos now. There's a lot of big egos in that courtroom. But again, I don't know what Jackson's getting. I don't know what Unetti's getting at this point. Um, but I know that Alessi's doing this for nothing. Like he's literally, and think about the amount of time he spent on it. Do you know what an expense that is? Like, hats off to that man. Like, hats off to that guy. And he came in one of my chats a while. He's even been engaged online. And I'm not saying just because he came in my chat. I at the time I'd watched him a few times and I saw him sitting there. But what I've seen in this trial, when he's taken on the way he took apart um Burgess, I mean, was just absolutely amazing. I loved it. I mean, he took that guy apart and he pounced on him and he absolutely said, wait a minute, you can't trust anything this guy's saying. But every witness he's been involved in, every time he's been there, he's an advocate, he's arguing, and he is absolutely just, I mean, exactly what you want. He really is a really, really good attorney. And I'm glad he's getting the exposure because he certainly deserves it. And I hope to see him, he deserves to hopefully be involved in other big cases that are going on around time. And I think he will be, because I think, listen, he's this is exactly why he stepped up the way he did. And I hope he's getting something. I hope he's getting at least expenses, because I can't imagine, you put your law practice on hold. He's earning nothing right now. Um, Maybe he'll write a book, I guess. But I mean, what did I mean? Wow. To me, that's just what character that shows, that you'd be willing to do that for another human being. And he's doing it according to what he told me when he was in my chat. He told me he's doing this because it's his strong sense of right and wrong, and he thinks what's happening here is wrong. That's why he's here. And that to me tells me this he is exactly what we need for attorneys. I mean, that's exactly the type of human being and person that needs to be an attorney, because they're here to fight, and they're here to ensure that people's rights are upheld, and they're here to show that when things aren't happening the way they're supposed to, they're out here lending a voice to it, and we're lending a voice to it. What we're doing here online is great. We need people. We need to have a full frontal approach to these things. That look, we have a full chorus of voices speaking out when things aren't going the way they're supposed to, when people are running afoul of the Constitution, people are running afoul of the law, people are doing things that are not supposed to be happening. And that's the big thing here. Listen, none of us have a bone in this fight. If Karen Reed did this, we want her to be convicted, right? Because that's what's supposed to happen, and that's what should happen. I don't ever advocate for someone to not be convicted if the evidence is there. That's what's supposed to happen. What isn't supposed to happen is cover-ups. What isn't supposed to happen is having the degree of things that haven't been investigated in this case happen. It just shouldn't happen. Thank you, Under Your Scars. I really appreciate that. Very much appreciate that. She says, I would love them to be my lawyers if needed, but maybe if I won the lottery. Thanks for covering. Great to see you. Free Karen. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your continued support of the channel. It really means a lot. It really, really does. So thank you so much. Um, and we'll leave that up there until we have something else to put up. But thank you. So very much appreciate it. Very, very much appreciate it. But this is what it's about, lending a voice to cases like these and other cases across the country that we've got to, and again, I found out an interesting thing because I was going through my dad's books and I was looking into one of his cases and it's funny that I'll tell you all this later. We're finally in session, I think.